My name is Margaret, and at 65 I thought my doorbell days were over. Standing in my beautiful beach house that overlooks the ocean, a successful baker who built a cookie empire from scratch, I couldn't believe my eyes. 20 years of being left out had taught me to live without them. Through my window, I saw faces I hadn't seen in 2 decades, looking nervous and hopeful. The same people who forgot I existed had come knocking at my door. I'll tell you everything. First, let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Charlotte Johnson from Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. Growing up in a small town in Texas, life should have been simple and sweet. My dad, Frank, ran the local hardware store and always came home tired but happy. My mom, Betty, worked at the town library and knew every book by heart. We lived in a cozy house with a big front porch where we'd sit and drink lemonade. Everyone said we looked like the perfect family with our Sunday church clothes and family dinners. But looks can trick you. I was the middle child of 3 kids. My older sister Rose was the star of everything. She sang in the church choir, won spelling bees, and made friends with everyone she met. My younger brother Tommy was the baby who could do no wrong. He played baseball, made everyone laugh, and got hugs for everything he did. Then there was me, quiet Margaret, who loved to bake. From the time I was little, I felt different from the others. When Rose won a contest, there were parties and cake. When Tommy hit a home run, Dad would take him for ice cream. But when I baked my first perfect apple pie at age 8, Mom just said it was nice and put it away. When I won the county fair baking contest 2 years later, they forgot to come watch me get my ribbon. Dad was at Tommy's baseball practice, and Mom was helping Rose with her singing. I spent hours in our kitchen, mixing and measuring, creating recipes that made our whole house smell like heaven. But nobody seemed to notice. When Rose practiced piano, everyone would gather around to listen. When Tommy threw baseballs in the yard, Dad would cheer and clap. But when I pulled warm cookies from the oven, people would eat them without a word. It was like my hard work was invisible. I remember asking Mom why nobody cared about my baking. She patted my head and said, "Honey, cooking is just something girls are supposed to do. It's not special like singing or sports." Those words hurt more than a bee sting. Dad wasn't mean, but he wasn't interested either. He would rush to every single one of Tommy's games, wearing his lucky hat and cheering until his voice was gone. But when I entered my chocolate cake in the state fair, he said baking contests weren't real competitions. "It's just mixing ingredients, Margaret," he said with a shrug. "Anyone can follow a recipe." Later I found out he had asked his friend to cover the store so he could watch Tommy's team warm up for a game that didn't even matter. My 12th birthday showed me exactly where I fit in this family. Mom had promised a party with all my school friends, and I was so excited I could barely sleep. I had planned to bake my own birthday cake, something special with 3 layers and strawberry frosting. The morning of my birthday, I woke up early and ran to the kitchen to start baking. "Margaret, change of plans," Mom announced while drinking her coffee. "Rose has her big solo performance at church tonight, and we all need to be there to support her." My heart dropped like a stone into a deep well. "But Mom, my friends are coming at 2 o'clock. We can't cancel now." "Don't be selfish," Dad said from behind his newspaper. "Your sister needs us. Family comes first. Family comes first." Those 3 words would echo in my head for years to come, especially because they never seemed to count when I needed my family. The party was quickly cancelled. I had to call each friend while trying not to cry, explaining that we couldn't celebrate today. Then I was dragged to sit in a hard church pew for 2 hours, listening to Rose sing while everyone told her how talented she was. Nobody remembered it was my birthday. Nobody sang happy birthday. There was no cake, no presents, just leftover sandwiches from the church potluck. I ate alone in my room that night, tears falling onto my plate while I listened to everyone downstairs praising Rose's beautiful voice. Tommy wasn't mean like some brothers can be. He was just busy with his own world of sports and friends. When Rose would tease me about being just a kitchen girl, Tommy would just shrug and keep playing with his toys. He lived in his own happy bubble, too young to see that his quiet sister was slowly disappearing. Rose was the hardest to live with. She would invite friends over and lock the kitchen door so I couldn't bake while they were there. "Nobody wants to smell your boring cookies," she would say with a mean smile. She would use my special mixing bowls for her art projects and return them stained and scratched. When I complained to Mom and Dad, Rose would put on her sweetest smile and say, "Margaret is just being dramatic again." And they always believed her. The only person who saw my heart was my great-aunt Ruby, Dad's aunt who lived just outside town. Aunt Ruby visited every few weeks and always found me in the kitchen. "You have magic in your hands, child," she would tell me as we rolled out pie dough together. "Someday the whole world will taste your love." She brought me real vanilla beans and special chocolate because she saw how much I cared about making things perfect. She came to my school baking competitions and sat in the front row, clapping louder than anyone else. With Aunt Ruby, I didn't have to fight for attention or prove I was worth loving. School, my teachers loved my treats. I would bring extra cupcakes for classroom parties and cookies for Teacher Appreciation Day. My home economics teacher, Mrs. Peterson, said I had a natural gift that couldn't be taught. "You don't just follow recipes, Margaret," she would say. "You create happiness." But at home, these compliments meant nothing. "Book learning won't help you find a husband," Mom would say when Mrs. Peterson called to praise my skills. "You need to focus on being social like Rose if you want to make something of yourself." I tried joining the school chorus like Rose, but my voice was average. I tried playing softball like Tommy, but I was clumsy and slow. Nothing I did seemed to matter to them. By the time I reached high school, I had learned to be invisible. I spent my free time in the kitchen, perfecting recipes and dreaming of opening my own bakery someday. I got a job after school at Miller's Bakery downtown, where old Mr. Miller taught me professional techniques. I saved every penny, hiding my money in a coffee can under my bed. When college brochures came for culinary schools in big cities, my parents barely glanced at them. "Cooking school is expensive," Dad said without looking up from his paper. "Girls like you should think about more practical jobs." But I had already made up my mind to leave this place behind. When acceptance letters arrived from culinary schools in New York and California, my family seemed shocked that I had even applied. "Those places are so far away," Mom said with worry in her voice. But I heard something else too, relief that I might be leaving. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Dad asked, but he didn't sound like he really cared about my answer. My heart knew the truth then. I wasn't a beloved daughter they would miss. I was just someone taking up space in their house. But knowing this made me stronger, not weaker. I would build a life where my talents mattered, where people would see my worth. Little did I know that the worst hurt was still coming, and it would show me once and for all where I really stood in this family. The day that broke my heart completely happened when I was 25. I had graduated from culinary school in New York with highest honors and opened a small bakery in Brooklyn. My chocolate chip cookies were becoming famous, and food writers were starting to notice my work. I thought maybe, finally, my family might be proud of me. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Aunt Ruby had died suddenly from a heart attack. I dropped everything and flew home to Texas for the funeral, my heart breaking for the one person who had always believed in me. The funeral was packed with people from all over town who remembered Aunt Ruby's kindness. I sat in the front row, holding the last letter she had written me, where she said she was so proud of my bakery. During the service, I sat alone while my parents, Rose and Tommy, stood together like a wall. Nobody thought to comfort me, even though everyone knew how close Aunt Ruby and I had been. After the service, we all gathered at Mom and Dad's house. The lawyer was coming to read Aunt Ruby's will that afternoon. I sat quietly in the kitchen where I had spent so many lonely hours as a child, trying to process losing my biggest supporter. When the lawyer arrived, everyone crowded into the living room. He read through the usual stuff. Aunt Ruby's house went to Dad, her car to Tommy, and her jewelry to Rose. Then came the surprise that made everyone gasp. "To my dear great-niece Margaret," the lawyer read, "I leave my grandmother's silver locket and the sum of $8,000. You were always the sweetest child, and I know you'll make me proud with your gift." The room went dead silent. Then Mom made a disgusted sound with her mouth. $8,000 and an old necklace. That's all. I was shocked but touched. I hadn't expected anything, and the silver locket had belonged to my great-great-grandmother. It wasn't about the money, but about Aunt Ruby remembering me when others forgot. Dad's face turned red like a tomato. "This is crazy," he sputtered. "Ruby always spoiled Margaret for no good reason." For no good reason. I felt my cheeks get hot. "Maybe because she was the only one who was ever kind to me in this family," I said, finding my voice for the first time in years. That's when everything exploded like a firecracker. 23 years of secrets came pouring out like water from a broken dam. "You want to talk about kindness?" Dad shouted, standing up so fast his chair fell over. "We took you in when nobody wanted you. We gave you food and clothes and a roof over your head. This is how you thank us." My brain felt fuzzy. Took me in. What was he talking about? "Dad, what do you mean took me in?" Mom shot Dad a look that could have frozen water, but it was too late. The secret was spilling out. "You're not even our real daughter," he said, his words hitting me like rocks. "You were 3 years old when we adopted you. Your mom was Betty's cousin who got pregnant and couldn't take care of you. She died in a car crash when you were little. Nobody else in the family wanted a toddler, so we took you in." The room started spinning around me. Adopted. This couldn't be real. I looked at Mom, hoping she would say Dad was lying. Instead, she just sighed like she was tired. "We were going to tell you when you got older, but then it just never seemed like the right time. 25 years. And there was never a right time to tell me the truth about who I was. So I've been living a lie my whole life." I whispered, my voice shaking. "Does everybody know but me?" "Most people in town know," Rose said, acting like it was no big deal. "We just didn't talk about it around you." Not talked about around me, the person whose whole life it was about. I felt sick to my stomach. "Why did Aunt Ruby leave Margaret that money anyway?" Tommy asked the lawyer. "She should have left it to real family." Real family. Those words cut through me like a sharp knife. "Mrs. Ruby told me to give it to Margaret because she said real family is about love, not blood," the lawyer said, looking uncomfortable with our fight. That made Dad even madder. That old woman always filled Margaret's head with silly ideas, made her think she was special when we were trying to teach her to be realistic about her place. "My place?" asked, my voice getting louder. "And where exactly is my place in this family?" "You should be grateful we kept you," Rose snapped. "Do you know how many kids end up in foster homes? You had it easy compared to them." I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for the first time. Easy. Like being ignored and forgotten was easy. Like having my dreams dismissed was a gift. "I see," I said quietly. "So all those years of being treated like I didn't matter, all those missed birthdays and ignored achievements, I should be grateful for that? Don't you dare talk to us like that under our roof," Dad yelled, pointing his finger at me. "If you can't show some respect for everything we've done, then maybe you should just leave." I looked around the room at these people I had called family for 25 years. Not one of them stood up for me. Not even Tommy, who had always been the gentlest. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. "Fine," I said calmly, picking up my purse. "I'll go. But first tell me one thing. Did you ever love me at all? Or was I just a burden you regretted taking on?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. I walked out of that house and promised myself I would never come back. The separation from family became official after that terrible day. I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving or Christmas or any family gatherings after that. I would see pictures on the internet of family parties and holidays, all without me in them. Rose would post photos with captions like "perfect family time" and "blessed to have everyone together," making sure I knew I wasn't part of everyone. There were emails from Dad telling me not to contact them anymore and to leave the family alone, like I was some stranger who might bother them instead of someone who had lived as their daughter for over 20 years. The deepest pain came when I saw pictures of my parents at Rose's wedding and later holding Tommy's new baby. These were moments I should have been part of, but I had been erased from the family story like I never existed. With Aunt Ruby's $8,000 and her silver locket that I promised never to sell, I cut all ties and swore to build a life so successful they would someday regret throwing me away. I had no idea how completely that promise would come true. With $8,000 in my pocket and Aunt Ruby's silver locket around my neck, I returned to New York determined to start over completely. The money wouldn't last long in an expensive city, so I had to be very careful with every dollar. I found a tiny apartment above an old pizza shop, where the smell of garlic and cheese filled my room day and night. My space was so small that my bed folded into the wall, and I had to use the bathroom down the hall that I shared with 5 other people. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and nobody could take it away from me. I worked 3 jobs to pay for everything. During the day, I decorated cakes at a fancy bakery in Manhattan. At night, I waited tables at a diner that served coffee and pie to taxi drivers and night shift workers. On weekends, I catered small parties for people who found my business card at the bakery. My days started at 4 in the morning and ended past midnight, but every hour was an investment in my future. The fancy bakery where I worked during the day was owned by a famous French pastry chef named Pierre, who was known for being very difficult to please. Most employees quit within a month because he yelled and criticized everything. But I was determined to learn from him, no matter how mean he was. "Your technique is sloppy," he would say, throwing away my work. "Do it again until it's perfect." Other workers thought he was cruel, but I saw it as training. Every criticism taught me something new. Every redo made me better. To save money, I ate peanut butter sandwiches for breakfast and lunch every day. I bought day-old bread from the bakery and made it last for a week. I washed my clothes by hand in my tiny sink and hung them on a line outside my window. I walked everywhere to save bus fare, even when it was snowing or raining. Every penny I saved went into a cookie jar that I kept hidden under my bed, building toward my dream of opening my own bakery. 6 months into my New York adventure, I entered a city-wide baking contest that offered $10,000 to the winner. The theme was childhood comfort, and I knew exactly what to make. I created a 7-layer cake that tasted like a warm hug, with flavors of vanilla, cinnamon, and honey that reminded people of being safe and loved. I worked on the recipe for weeks, testing it on my diner customers and adjusting it until it was perfect. The night before the contest, I stayed up all night baking, my hands shaking with nerves and excitement. When I arrived at the contest with my cake, I saw professional bakers with fancy equipment and years of experience. I felt like a small fish in a big ocean. But when the judges tasted my cake, their faces lit up with joy. "This tastes like coming home," one of them said with tears in her eyes. I won first place and $10,000, but more importantly, I caught the attention of a food writer from a famous magazine. "You have something special," she told me. "It's not just skill, it's heart. You bake with love, and people can taste it." She wrote a story about me called "The Baker Who Creates Magic," and suddenly people all over the city wanted to try my desserts. With the contest money and my savings, I was able to rent a small storefront in Brooklyn and open Margaret's Magic Kitchen. It was tiny, with just enough room for an oven, a counter, and 2 small tables, but it was my dream come true. I painted the walls myself in warm yellow and hung pictures of all my favorite desserts. I made gingham curtains for the windows and put fresh flowers on each table every day. The first week was slow, with only a few curious neighbors stopping by. But word spread quickly about the lady who made cookies that could make you cry happy tears. Soon there were lines outside my door every morning, people waiting to taste whatever magic I had baked that day. My chocolate chip cookies became famous throughout Brooklyn. Food bloggers wrote about them, and people would travel from other states just to try them. I had to hire my first employee, a sweet girl named Maria who had just moved from Mexico and needed work. "You saved my life," she told me when I offered her the job. "No," I said. "We're saving each other's lives." As my bakery grew, so did my confidence. Within 2 years, I had expanded to the store next door and hired 5 more employees. Each person I hired became like family to me. We celebrated birthdays, supported each other through hard times, and shared in each other's successes. I was creating the loving workplace I had always dreamed of. My third year in business, a television producer discovered my bakery and asked me to appear on a national baking show. I was terrified but excited. On the show, I talked about learning to bake as a lonely child and how food could bring people together. I made my famous 7-layer comfort cake, the same one that had won the contest years before. The show was watched by millions of people, and the next day my phone rang non-stop with orders from across the country. That television appearance changed everything. Suddenly, everyone wanted Margaret's magic kitchen cookies. I had to move to a much larger space and hire 20 people to keep up with orders. We started shipping cookies all over America, and I began writing a cookbook. The cookbook, called Baking with Love, became a bestseller. In it, I shared not just recipes but stories about how food connects us to happiness and to each other. I wrote about Aunt Ruby and how she taught me that cooking with love makes everything taste better. I never mentioned my adoptive family. That pain was still too fresh. Success brought wonderful changes to my life. I moved from my tiny apartment to a beautiful house near the ocean in Long Island. It had a huge kitchen with 3 ovens, marble countertops, and windows that looked out over the water. I could finally breathe deeply and feel at peace. But even with all this success, there was still an empty place in my heart where a family should be. Every night, I would sit on my porch watching the sunset over the ocean, feeling proud of what I had built but lonely for people to share it with. On quiet evenings, I would hold Aunt Ruby's silver locket and remember her words. "You have magic in your hands, child." 10 years after opening my first tiny bakery, I had built a cookie empire. Margaret's Magic Kitchen had 50 locations across the country. I had written 3 best-selling cookbooks, and had my own television show where I taught people to bake with love. My face was on magazine covers with headlines like "The Cookie Queen Who Conquered America" and "From Small Town to Sweet Success." But the people who had raised me never reached out, not even a congratulations card. Their silence said everything I needed to know about how they really felt. I used my success to help others who felt alone and forgotten. I started a program that taught baking to kids in foster care, giving them skills and confidence they could carry forever. I opened a free community kitchen where anyone could come for a warm meal and fresh cookies. Every person who walked through those doors was treated like family, because I knew how it felt to be invisible. My employees weren't just workers. They were people I cared about deeply. When Maria's daughter got sick, I paid for her medical treatment. When my assistant chef wanted to go to culinary school, I paid his tuition. When my store manager's husband lost his job, I helped them keep their house. I was building the supportive family I had always wanted but never had. 15 years after leaving Texas, I decided to expand my business to include a cooking school and event space. I bought a beautiful mansion in the Hamptons with huge kitchens, elegant dining rooms, and gardens where we could host weddings and parties. The property cost $12 million, but I could afford it easily now. The mansion became my home and the headquarters of my growing empire. I designed every room myself, making sure it felt warm and welcoming instead of cold and fancy. The main kitchen was bigger than the entire house I grew up in, with professional equipment and enough space for 20 people to cook together. I hired a team of teachers and began offering cooking classes to people from all over the world. Students would stay for a week, learning not just techniques but the joy of creating food with love. Many of them told me it was the best week of their lives, that they felt more confident and happier than ever before. My success story was featured in business magazines and newspapers around the world. I was invited to cook for presidents and movie stars. My cookies were served at royal weddings and important celebrations. But the most meaningful moments were small ones. When a student finally mastered a difficult recipe, when a troubled teenager in my foster care program smiled for the first time, when Maria brought her grandchildren to visit and they called me Grandma Margaret. These were the moments that filled my heart more than any award or recognition. 20 years had passed since I left my adoptive family behind. I had built a life more successful than I ever imagined possible. My business was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, I owned beautiful homes, and I was respected around the world. But the deepest joy came from the people who had chosen to be part of my life. My employees who had become family. The students who wrote letters thanking me for believing in them. The community members who found comfort in my kitchens. I had created the loving family I had always wanted, built from choice rather than obligation. On a quiet Sunday morning in October, exactly 20 years after I had walked out of my adoptive family's house, I was sitting on my terrace enjoying coffee and watching seagulls fly over the ocean. I was still in my robe and slippers, feeling peaceful and content with my life. The security buzzer from my front gate startled me out of my peaceful morning thoughts. I rarely had unexpected visitors, especially so early on a Sunday. Annoyed at being interrupted, I picked up my tablet to check who was there. What I saw on the security camera made me drop my coffee cup, which shattered on the stone floor with a crash that echoed through the quiet morning air. There they stood at my gate like figures from a dream I had tried to forget. Dad, now in his 80s. His hair completely white and his shoulders bent with age. Mom beside him, wearing the same style of dress she had always favored, but now she looked smaller and frilier. Rose stood behind them, no longer the golden child but a middle-aged woman with worry lines around her eyes and 2 teenagers beside her. Tommy was there too, his boyish face now round and tired-looking, holding the hand of a woman I didn't recognize who must be his wife. 20 years. 20 years of silence, of being erased from their lives, of building my success without a single word from them. And here they were, standing at the entrance to the life I had created completely without their help or support. My first thought was to ignore them entirely, to let them stand there until they gave up and went away. But curiosity won over anger. What could possibly have brought them here after 2 decades of treating me like I was dead? What could they want from me now? With shaking hands, I pressed the intercom button. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and neutral. "Margaret, it's Mom and Dad," came my mother's voice through the speaker, sounding older and more fragile than I remembered. "And Rose and Tommy. We were hoping we could talk with you." Talk with me. After 20 years of complete silence, they wanted to talk. I should have told them no immediately. I should have sent them away and never looked back. But some small part of me, the part that had never stopped being that little girl who wanted her family's love, made me press the button to open the gate. I hurried to my bedroom to change out of my robe, pulling on nice jeans and a sweater. I didn't want to look like I had dressed up for them, but I also didn't want to seem unprepared. By the time the doorbell rang, I had put on my game face. Calm, professional, and in control. I opened the front door and saw them all standing on my porch, looking up at my beautiful mansion with expressions of shock and amazement. They had clearly not expected me to be living like this. "Margaret," Mom said, stepping forward with her arms open like she wanted to hug me. "You look so successful and happy." I stepped back slightly, avoiding the embrace. "Thank you," I replied coolly. "This is quite a surprise. We've been trying to work up the courage to contact you," Dad said, his voice much softer than the angry tone I remembered. "When we saw the article about your cooking school in People magazine, we thought maybe it was time to reconnect." People magazine. So they hadn't come because they missed me or felt bad about how they had treated me. They had come because they had seen evidence of my wealth and success in a national publication. "Please come inside," I said, my manners taking over even as my mind processed this revelation. I led them through my grand entrance hall with its chandelier and marble floors, into my main living room where enormous windows looked out over my gardens and the ocean beyond. The room was decorated with comfortable but expensive furniture, original paintings, and fresh flowers from my garden. "This is quite a home you have here," Tommy said, his eyes wide as he looked around at the elegant space. "Thank you," I said simply, gesturing for them to sit on my cream-colored sofas. "Can I get anyone something to drink? Coffee, tea, water?" "Coffee would be wonderful," Mom said, settling carefully onto the sofa like she was afraid she might break something. I used the excuse of making coffee to escape to my kitchen for a few minutes, leaning against my marble counter and taking deep breaths to calm myself. I had imagined this scene so many times over the years, but now that it was actually happening, I felt completely unprepared and emotionally shaky. When I returned with a tray of coffee served in my finest china, a small display of success I couldn't resist, Rose's teenagers were looking around the room with wide eyes while the adults sat in uncomfortable silence. "These are my children," Rose said as I set down the coffee service. "Ashley is 16 and Michael is 14. I nodded politely to the teenagers, wondering if Rose had ever mentioned having an aunt. Did these kids even know I existed, or had I been completely erased from the family history they were told? "They're lovely," I said because it seemed like the right thing to say. "We've missed you so much, Margaret," Mom said, her eyes filling with tears that looked genuine. "All these years we've wondered about you and regretted how things ended." "Have you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the anger rising in my chest. "That's interesting because I haven't received a single phone call, email, birthday card, or Christmas greeting in 20 years. We didn't know how to reach out," Dad said, looking down at his hands. "After everything that happened, we weren't sure if you'd want to hear from us." "You could have tried," I pointed out calmly. "My business isn't exactly hidden. I've been on television, written books, and been featured in magazines for years. Finding me wouldn't have been difficult." "We have been following your career," Rose said quickly. "Reading about all your success. We're all very proud of you." "Proud of me?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "Now you're proud," I said quietly. "Not when I won my first baking contest in high school. Not when I graduated from culinary school. Not when I opened my first bakery. Only now, when I have a mansion and a famous business. Now you're proud." The room fell silent except for the sound of waves outside my windows. Rose's teenagers looked confused and uncomfortable, clearly sensing the tension between the adults but not understanding what was happening. "Margaret," Dad said after a long moment, clearing his throat nervously. "We didn't just come to reconnect, though we desperately hope we can rebuild our relationship. We also came because we need your help." And there it was. The real reason for their sudden appearance in my life after 20 years. "What kind of help?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Financial help," Dad admitted, his face reddening with embarrassment. "The hardware store went out of business 5 years ago when the big chain stores moved into town. At my age, nobody wants to hire an old man, and our savings are almost gone. I lost my teaching job when the school district made cuts," Mom added quietly. "My pension isn't enough to live on. I'm going through a terrible divorce," Rose said, her voice dropping so her children wouldn't hear clearly. "My husband left me for a younger woman, and the legal fees are eating up everything we had saved. And I lost my construction job when my back gave out," Tommy said, his wife squeezing his hand supportively. "We've been struggling to pay our medical bills and keep the house." I looked at each of them. These people who had cast me aside when I had nothing and who now sat in my beautiful home asking for my help. The nerve was breathtaking. "We were thinking," Dad continued, clearly mistaking my silence for consideration, "that maybe you could help us start a family restaurant. With your expertise and our family recipes, we could create something wonderful together. A loan of maybe $300,000 would get us started." Family restaurant. After 20 years of excluding me from the family, now they wanted to use my money to start a family business. "Of course you'd be a full partner," Mom said eagerly. "Though I'm sure you're too busy with your own empire to be involved in day-to-day operations. But it would help secure Ashley and Michael's college funds." She gestured toward Rose's children, a calculated move designed to tug at heartstrings I wasn't sure I still had. "We'd pay you back with interest," Dad added quickly. "And maybe you could consider giving us a small percentage of your business profits to help the family get back on its feet. Keep the wealth in the family, you know." The sickness I felt was overwhelming. The absolute audacity of these people to walk into my home after 20 years of silence and ask not just for money, but for a piece of the empire I had built entirely without them. To speak of family as if it were something that included me when it was financially convenient. I stood up slowly from my chair, smoothing my sweater as I gathered my thoughts. The room felt electric with tension, my adoptive family watching me with expressions that ranged from hopeful to desperately calculating. Please make yourselves comfortable, I said with practiced politeness. The coffee is from a small farm in Guatemala that I visited last year to select beans for my restaurants. This casual mention of international travel, of the kind of lifestyle where one could personally visit coffee farms in Central America, was not lost on them. Dad's eyes narrowed as he recalculated just how wealthy I had become. Rose glanced around my living room with new interest, as if mentally pricing every piece of art and furniture. I excused myself briefly and returned with a photo album and my laptop, setting both on the coffee table between us. I sat back down, crossing my legs confidently, the way I sat in business meetings when I knew I held all the power. Before we discuss any financial matters, I said calmly, I think we should catch up on the past 20 years. After all, we're family, right? I emphasized the word family, just enough to make the irony crystal clear. Mom nodded enthusiastically. Yes, absolutely. We have so much catching up to do. Let's start with family gatherings, I suggested, opening the photo album. I've been keeping track of them, you see. Their confused expressions quickly turned to discomfort as I revealed the first page, a printed screenshot from social media from 20 years ago, just months after our falling out. It showed a Thanksgiving table full of smiling faces at my parents' house. The caption read, "Thankful for our complete family today and always. This was taken 4 months after you told me to never contact you again," I said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. I noticed everyone was there. Uncle Jim and Aunt Carol drove in from Dallas. Cousin Sarah brought her new boyfriend. Even Great-Uncle Pete made the trip despite his arthritis. I turned the page slowly. Christmas, same year. Nothing beats having all your loved ones together for the holidays. That's a beautiful tree, Mom. Did you use the ornaments I made in elementary school? Or were those thrown away along with my baby pictures? Page after page, I showed them evidence of the life they had lived without me. Birthday parties, graduations, Easter brunches, 4th of July barbecues, all documented on social media with captions about complete family celebrations, and everyone we love gathered together. Why do you have all of these? Rose asked, her voice tight with discomfort. Research, I replied with a slight smile. A basic business principle, Rose. Always know who you're dealing with. You taught me that lesson, Dad. Probably the most valuable thing you ever said to me. Always understand people's true motivations before you trust them. I closed the album and opened my laptop, turning the screen toward them. Now let's look at more recent history. I showed them an email from Dad dated 15 years ago and read it aloud in my steady voice. Margaret, you must stop attempting to contact family members. Your mother was very distressed by your birthday card to Tommy. We have moved forward with our lives and expect you to respect our wishes for privacy. Frank Mitchell. I looked directly at Dad. That was your response to the single birthday card I sent to Tommy for his 21st birthday. Not a request to visit. Not a demand for apologies. Just a card wishing him happy birthday. That was your reaction. Dad had enough shame to look down at his coffee cup, unable to meet my eyes. And this, I continued, scrolling to another screenshot, is from Rose's Facebook page 5 years ago, where she shared an article about my cookbook making the bestseller list. Her comment was, "Ugh, another article about my successful sister. Mom won't stop talking about it. Amazing how money makes people forget someone was always the weird one growing up. Some people get lucky despite having no social skills." Rose's face flushed bright red. I didn't mean. "Oh, I think you meant exactly what you wrote," I interrupted gently. "But it's fine, Rose. Your opinion of me stopped mattering a very long time ago." I closed the laptop and leaned forward, looking each of them directly in the eyes. "For 20 years, you have lived your lives as if I never existed. You celebrated holidays, shared important moments, supported each other through difficult times. You were a family in every sense of the word. Just without me. And that was entirely your choice." I stood and walked to my large windows, looking out at the ocean and the gardens I had created, at the peaceful life I had built. "Now you come here to the home I built, to the life I created completely without your help or support. And you speak about family as if it's something that can be turned on and off whenever it becomes financially convenient or profitable. I turned back to face them, my voice calm but firm. Let me be absolutely clear about something. I don't need a family that only acknowledges me when I have something valuable to offer them. I don't need parents who only show pride when I'm wealthy. I don't need siblings who mock me privately but come asking for handouts publicly. The color had drained from Mom's face. Dad sat stiffly in his chair, looking older than his 80 years. Rose and Tommy both stared at their hands, unable to look at me directly. That being said, I continued, my voice softening as I looked at Rose's teenagers, who appeared confused and uncomfortable with the adult tension around them. I don't believe in punishing children for their parents' choices. I returned to my seat and addressed Ashley and Michael directly. You two are my niece and nephew, though we've never met until today. That's not your fault, and I'd like to change that if you're interested. The teenagers looked to their mother uncertainly, not sure how to respond to this aunt they were just learning about. To that end, I said, returning my attention to the adults, I will not be giving you $300,000 to start a restaurant that will probably fail within 2 years. I will not be handing over percentages of my business to people who have contributed nothing to its success. What I will do is establish college funds for Ashley and Michael to ensure they can attend any university they choose and pursue whatever dreams they have. Rose's expression was a complicated mix of relief, disappointment, and wounded pride. We don't need your charity, she started to say. It's not charity, I cut her off firmly. It's an investment in the only people in this room who are truly innocent. The funds will be managed by my financial advisors and can only be used for educational expenses. You will have no access to the money whatsoever. I stood again, signaling that this uncomfortable reunion was coming to an end. That is my offer. You can accept it or reject it. The choice is yours. Dad struggled to his feet, his face red with familiar anger. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us. What exactly did you do for me? I asked quietly. Please remind me. We gave you a home when nobody else wanted you, he sputtered. We fed you and clothed you and sent you to school. We treated you like our own daughter. You did the legal minimum required of adoptive parents, I corrected him calmly. And you made sure I understood every single day that it was an obligation, not an act of love. The moment I was old enough to be discarded, you did exactly that. Mom stood up shakily, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Margaret, please. We made terrible mistakes. We're truly sorry. Are you sorry for what you did to me? I asked. Or are you sorry that I became successful without you? Because those are completely different things. She had no answer for that question. I think it's time for all of you to leave, I said gently but with finality. My assistant will contact you about the college funds for Ashley and Michael if you decide to accept them. Otherwise, I wish you well in whatever you choose to do next. I walked them to my front door, maintaining my composure through sheer determination. As they stepped onto my porch, Rose turned back, her expression softer than I had seen in decades. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I really am proud of what you've accomplished. I mean that sincerely. Too little too late, Rose, I replied, though not unkindly. Take care of your children. They deserve better than what we experienced. I closed the door on my past and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to come. But these weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of release and relief. In facing my adoptive family and refusing to be manipulated by them again, I had finally freed myself from the last chains of their approval. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand completely. Maria. It's Margaret. Can you come over? My family just left, and I really need a friend right now. As I waited for Maria to arrive, I looked around at the beautiful home I had created, at the successful life I had built from nothing but determination and the belief that I deserved better than what I had been given. For the first time in my life, I truly believed that Aunt Ruby would be proud of the woman I had become, not just for my financial success, but for finding the strength to stand up for myself and refuse to be treated poorly ever again. The sound of Maria's car in my driveway announced her arrival just 20 minutes after my call. One of the things I treasured most about our friendship was her unwavering loyalty. When I needed support, she was always there, no questions asked. She found me in my garden, sitting on the bench I had installed in memory of Aunt Ruby, the silver locket gleaming around my neck as I touched it absently, a habit I had developed over the years when I needed comfort. "Oh, honey," she said softly, sitting beside me and putting her arm around my shoulders. "Rough morning." I managed a weak smile. "You could definitely say that." I told her everything, from the moment I saw them on my security camera to their final departure from my home. Maria listened without interruption, her face reflecting my emotions as the story unfolded. $300,000 and a percentage of your business, she repeated when I finished. After 20 years of complete silence. The nerve of some people is just incredible. That made me laugh despite everything. That's exactly what I was thinking. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching butterflies dance around the flowers I had planted in Aunt Ruby's memory. The emotional roller coaster of the morning had left me exhausted, but also strangely peaceful. "You know what the most surprising part was?" said finally. "For years I dreamed about a moment like this, about them seeing my success and regretting how they had treated me. But now that it's actually happened, it feels empty somehow. Their regret, if they even really feel it, doesn't change anything that happened." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Because you've finally realized that their approval was never the real prize you were chasing." Her words hit me like a gentle revelation. "Exactly," I said, feeling something click into place in my mind. I spent so many years building this empire, earning this success, and part of me was still that little girl trying to prove I was worthy of being loved. But the problem was never with me. "And now," Maria prompted gently, "now I understand that their inability to love me properly was their failure, not mine. No amount of success on my part could ever fix what was broken in them." In the days that followed my family's unexpected visit, I experienced a whole range of emotions. Sometimes I felt angry about their audacity in asking for money. Sometimes I felt sad about the relationships that had never been real. But underneath all of those feelings was a growing sense of freedom. The last small hope I had been carrying, that someday they might acknowledge their mistakes and we could become a real family, had finally been put to rest. That fantasy had been holding me back in ways I hadn't fully understood until it was gone. A week after their visit, I made a decision that would change not only my life but potentially the lives of many others. I established the Ruby's Kitchen Foundation, named after my beloved great-aunt, dedicated to supporting children who had been adopted and then neglected or mistreated. The foundation would provide more than just money for food and school supplies. It would offer counseling services, mentorship programs, and legal support for children who found themselves in situations similar to what I had experienced. I committed $25 million as starting funds and decided to personally oversee its operations alongside my bakery empire. While planning the foundation, I reconnected with several old friends from culinary school who were now successful chefs around the country. Over a video call with 5 of them, I shared my vision for the foundation and my personal connection to its mission. "I had no idea you went through all that," said Chef Robert, who now owned restaurants in Chicago. "All those years we were in school together, you never let on how difficult your childhood had been." "I was good at hiding pain," I admitted. "I didn't want anyone feeling sorry for me." "It's not about pity, Margaret," said Chef Sarah, who ran a successful catering business in Atlanta. "It's about letting people who care about you actually support you. You've been carrying these burdens alone for too long." Her words stayed with me for days, making me think deeply about how I had built walls around my heart to protect myself from more rejection. But those same walls had also kept out the genuine love and friendship that people like Maria, my employees, and my students had been offering me for years. True to my word, I set up college funds for Ashley and Michael. Rose accepted them with a brief, formal email thanking me for my generosity toward the children. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a small bridge to the next generation, a chance to break the cycle of emotional neglect that had defined my own childhood. 3 months after my family's visit, I decided to join a support group for adults who had experienced adoption trauma and family rejection. Sitting in a circle with 12 other people who had similar stories, I found a level of understanding and acceptance I had never experienced before. These were people who knew firsthand the particular pain of being rejected by those who should have loved them unconditionally. "Family isn't always about blood," said a woman named Patricia during one particularly powerful session. "Real family is made up of people who choose to love you when you need it most, who celebrate your successes and support you through failures." This simple truth crystallized something I had been slowly learning over the past 20 years. Looking around at my life, at the relationships I had built with my employees, my students, my friends like Maria, I realized I had been creating a family of choice all along, one that was far more loving and supportive than the one I had been born into. There was Maria, who had believed in my vision when my bakery was just a tiny storefront in Brooklyn. There was Pierre, my difficult former boss, who had taught me that excellence requires discipline and had become an unlikely mentor and friend over the years. There were my employees, who had stood by me through the challenges of growing a business and who celebrated every milestone with genuine joy. There were the hundreds of students who had passed through my cooking school, many of whom still wrote to me years later, sharing their successes and thanking me for believing in them. 6 months after the confrontation with my adoptive family, I decided to host a special celebration at my Hampton mansion. Not a formal business event or charity gala, but a simple party to honor the people who had chosen to be part of my life. I invited everyone who had become important to me over the years. Maria and her family, my core team from the bakery, former students who had become successful chefs, friends from my support group, and even Pierre, who flew in from France for the occasion. My mansion and gardens were filled with laughter, conversation, and the sounds of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. As I looked around at these diverse, wonderful people who had chosen to be part of my story, I felt a sense of belonging that I had been searching for my entire life. Late in the evening, I found myself alone for a moment on the garden bench dedicated to Aunt Ruby's memory. The silver locket caught the light from the party lanterns strung through the trees, sparkling with the same warmth I remembered in her loving eyes. I could almost hear her voice saying the words that had sustained me through the hardest times. "You have magic in your hands, child. Someday the whole world will taste your love." She had been right all along, though not in the way either of us had expected. The magic hadn't just been in my ability to bake delicious treats. It had been in my capacity to create connections, to build community, to help others feel valued and loved. Blood relationships might be the starting point for some families, but they're certainly not the definition of what family really means. True family is built through daily choices to show up for one another, through love that is freely given rather than grudgingly provided, through respect and support that flows both ways. It can't be measured by DNA tests or legal adoption papers, but by the depth of care and the safety people find in each other's presence. My journey from rejected adoptive child to successful businesswoman had been driven partly by a need to prove my worth to people who had thrown me away. But the real transformation had come when I finally understood that my worth had never been in question. Only their ability to recognize it had been lacking. The family that had once defined me by my absence had lost all power over my happiness and self-worth. In their place was a community of chosen family. People who had earned their place in my life through their consistent love, support, and respect, not through accidents of birth or legal arrangements. As I sat in my beautiful garden, surrounded by the sounds of people who truly cared about me, I felt a peace I had never experienced before. The wounds from my childhood would always be part of my story, but they no longer controlled my future or defined my sense of self-worth. The silver locket around my neck was no longer just a reminder of the one person from my biological family who had truly loved me. It had become a symbol of an important truth I had learned through pain and ultimately triumph. We all have the power to create our own definitions of family, to build connections based on genuine love and mutual respect rather than obligation or convenience. For anyone watching this who has felt the sharp pain of family rejection, who has wondered if something is fundamentally wrong with them because the people who should have loved them most have turned away, I want you to know this important truth. Your worth as a person is not determined by those who failed to see and appreciate it. You deserve love, acceptance, and belonging just as much as anyone else. And you absolutely have the power to create a family of the heart that will treasure you exactly as you are, with all your strengths and imperfections. Sometimes the most beautiful, supportive families are the ones we consciously choose for ourselves rather than the ones we're randomly assigned by birth. Have you ever had to build your own chosen family when your biological one disappointed you? What helped you heal from family rejection and move forward? Please share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who is struggling with similar pain. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Granny's Voice, and share this with anyone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me. And remember that you are worthy of love exactly as you are. Sometimes the family that chooses you is far more precious than the one you were born into. The most important lesson I learned through all of this is that we don't have to remain victims of other people's inability to love us properly. We have the strength and the right to build lives filled with people who see our value, celebrate our successes, and stand by us through difficult times. That's what real family looks like. Not perfect people, but people who choose to love imperfectly but consistently. Thank you for watching Granny's Voice. And remember that your story isn't over yet. The best chapters might still be waiting to be written.